Hello, and welcome to the Intuitive Ouija. Thanks for clicking on my story. Before we begin, drop your city or country in the comments. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from. The memory of it all starts with the smell of dust, that sweet, dry scent of forgotten things that clung to the shelves of Analog Haven, a video store that was less a business and more a mausoleum for dead media, tucked between a laundromat and a boarded-up storefront on a street that time had aggressively decided to bypass. Leo had dragged me there, of course, fueled by his obsession with what he called the texture of the past, which was just a pretentious way of saying he collected VHS tapes with cheesy horror movie covers. I was just along for the ride, for something to do on a Tuesday night that didn't involve staring at my phone, and I remember the oppressive weight of the air inside, thick with the odor of decaying cardboard and the distinct, sharp tang of old plastic. We were the only customers, and the clerk, a man so pale, and still he might have been a prop, just nodded at us from behind a counter buried in unspooled tape, his eyes reflecting the flickering light of a small CRT TV playing a distorted test pattern. It was in the back corner, in a bin labeled miscellaneous, as is, that I found it, my fingers brushing against its unmarked, black shell. There was no label, no studio logo, just a matte darkness that seemed to swallow the dim light, and it felt colder than the other tapes, a deep, metallic chill that seeped into my skin. I showed it to Leo, and his face lit up with that manic curiosity I knew so well, a look that usually preceded bad decisions. "A mystery," he whispered, his voice full of reverence, and he paid the clerk $2 for it, the man taking the money with a hand that was startlingly cold, his gaze lingering on the tape for a moment too long, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes that I only now, in retrospect, recognize as pity. We took it back to my apartment, a cramped studio that still housed my dad's old Zenith TV and a top-loading VCR he'd refused to throw away, a bulky silver monstrosity that I kept more out of sentimental inertia than any real use. The air in my apartment always carried the faint, comforting smell of ozone and warm electronics from the old set. But that night, as Leo slid the black tape into the VCR and pushed it down with a solid, mechanical thunk, the smell changed, sharpening into something else, something more like the air after a lightning strike, charged and alien. The screen fizzed to life not with the usual blue and black snow, but with a perfect, static image of a Ouija board, a high-contrast, grainy photograph of one that looked like it was lifted from a 1970s occult magazine, the letters and numbers stark white against a jet-black background, the sun and moon symbols at the top looking like lifeless eyes. We both laughed, a nervous, dismissive sound. "Somebody's idea of a joke," Leo said, settling onto the floor in front of the TV, his face bathed in the CRT's hypnotic glow. "A video Ouija board. That's a new one." The planchette was a small, triangular sprite, a cluster of white pixels in the center of the board, and for a long minute, nothing happened. The only sound the low, constant hum of the VCR and the faint hiss from the TV speaker. Then it jerked. It was a tiny digital stutter, a single pixel's movement, but it was unmistakable. We fell silent. "Did you?" I started, but Leo shushed me, his eyes wide. The planchette moved again, smoother this time, sliding with a faint, audible scritch-scratch of digital noise across the screen to rest squarely on the H. A beat of silence, then it zipped to E, then L, then L. Hell, it stopped. Leo let out a shaky breath. "Okay, that's creepy. A looping animation. Clever. But it didn't feel like an animation. The movement was too erratic, too purposeful, pausing on the O as if considering it, then sliding back. My heart was starting to thud against my ribs, a dull, anxious rhythm. "Maybe we should turn it off," I suggested, but Leo was already leaning forward, his voice a low, challenging murmur. "Is anyone there?" The planchette shuddered, and then swept across the board to yes. The air in the room grew colder, the ozone smell now undercut with something foul like burning hair. I wrapped my arms around myself, the goose bumps rising on my skin palpable. "What's your name?" Leo asked, his bravado seeming to falter for a second. The planchette began to move, spelling out letters with a chilling, glitchy precision. Static. It paused on the sea, the pixels around it flickering. Static? I said, my voice sounding small and far away. As if in response, the entire image on the screen shuddered, the Ouija board flickering for a fraction of a second, replaced by a blast of roaring white noise before snapping back, the planchette now hovering over the word goodbye. Leo reached for the remote, but before his fingers could touch it, the VCR made a sound I'd never heard before, a loud, grinding clunk, like a gear stripping, and the power button on the remote did nothing. The TV remained on, the Ouija board glaring back at us. "It's stuck," he said, a note of panic entering his voice. He got up and went to the VCR, pressing the eject button repeatedly. Nothing. He tried to pull the plug from the wall, but his hand jerked back with a sharp cry. "It's hot. The plug is burning hot." That's when I noticed the window. It was dark out, a deep, normal nighttime dark when I'd last looked, but now it looked wrong. The city lights outside, the familiar grid of street lamps and apartment windows, had softened, their edges bleeding into a hazy, pixelated glow. The darkness between them wasn't black anymore. It was a field of shifting, murmuring gray static, like the screen of a dead channel. "Leo," I whispered, pointing a trembling finger. He turned from the stubborn VCR and followed my gaze, his face draining of all color. "What the hell is that?" he breathed, stepping closer to the window. He reached out to touch the glass, and his fingertips didn't quite meet a solid surface. They seemed to sink into the grain, the image of the outside world distorting around his hand like water around a stone. He snatched his hand back, staring at it as if it were contaminated. That was the first undeniable crack, the moment the world started to peel away from itself. The hum of the VCR, which had been a background nuisance, seemed to grow louder, swelling to fill the entire apartment, a constant, low-frequency drone that vibrated in my teeth and bones. The air itself began to feel thick, resistant, like wading through water, and when I looked at my own hands, I saw it, a fine, dancing grain, a layer of visual noise over my skin, as if I were being broadcast from a weak signal. The colors in the room began to desaturate, the vibrant red of a throw pillow bleeding into a muted pink, the warm yellow of the walls fading to a sickly greenish beige. The transition was slow, insidious, a gradual decay of reality that we were powerless to stop. We were trapped, not by locks or bars, but by the very fabric of our perception unraveling. The entity, the static, was making its presence known not as a figure or a voice, but as a corruption of everything around us. The light from the ceiling fixture now had faint, horizontal scan lines drifting slowly upwards. Sounds from the hallway, a neighbor's TV footsteps, became distorted, repeating the same half-second snippets over and over, a skipping record of life we could no longer access. We tried the phone, but the dial tone was a screech of modem-like static, and when I slammed it down, the sound of the receiver hitting the cradle stretched out into a long, decaying echo. Leo was frantic, pounding on the door, but the wood felt spongy, unreal under his fists, and the sound was muffled, distant. He turned to me, his face a mask of terror, the pixels dancing in his wide eyes. "We're inside it," he said, his voice cracking. "The tape. We're inside the goddamn tape." The truth of it hit me with the force of a physical blow. The Ouija board wasn't on the screen anymore. The screen was all around us. We were the program now. Hours bled together, meaningless in this place where time itself felt sticky and distorted. We must have slept, or something like it, a fitful lapse into unconsciousness filled with nightmares of scrolling lines and roaring silence. Because I remember waking up on the floor, the relentless hum still vibrating through me, to find Leo standing by the window, staring out into the endless gray snow. "It's looping," he said, his voice flat and drained. "Look, the same car. It's not a car, just a blur of light. It goes from left to right every, 37 seconds. It's on a loop. The whole outside world is just a few seconds of footage repeating forever." He was right. The pixelated cityscape was a lie, a backdrop. There was no depth, no life out there. It was then that the static decided to show us its power in a way that shattered any last vestige of hope. Leo turned from the window, his face contorted with a desperate rage. "This is impossible. We have to get out. We have to." His words cut off abruptly. His body stiffened, his head tilting back at an unnatural angle. A sound emerged from his throat, a wet, gurgling sound that was not his own. And then he began to move backwards. His mouth, which had been open mid-shout, closed. His raised fists unclenched and lowered to his sides. He took a step back, then another, his movements perfectly reversed, a marionette being manipulated by an unseen hand. His voice returned, a nightmarish, backward stream of gibberish, the vowels and consonants twisted into something alien and terrifying. "Tua tego tvew, elbasat mi sit." He was being rewound. I screamed his name, but the sound was swallowed by the humming air. I watched, paralyzed with a horror, so profound it felt like my mind was coming apart at the seams, as he walked backwards, retracing his steps to the exact spot by the window where he had been standing before. He reached it and froze, his body rigid, his eyes wide and unseeing, fixed on the looping cityscape. For a long, agonizing moment, nothing happened. Then, with another jerky, unnatural motion, he played forward. He turned from the window, his face contorted with rage. "This is impossible. We have to get out. We have to." He stopped, blinking, a dazed confusion replacing the anger. He looked at me, then at his hands, as if unsure how he'd gotten there. He had no memory of the rewind. The static had shown me its absolute control. It could edit us. It could make us repeat our lines. Leo, my friend, was just a clip in its endless library now. After that, he was never quite right. There were moments of lucidity, where the terror would break through and he'd sob uncontrollably, but they were becoming shorter, farther apart. More often, he'd just sit on the floor, staring at the TV screen, which now showed only a seething mass of black and white noise, and he'd hum along with the VCR's drone, his voice a perfect match for the frequency. Sometimes his image would flicker like a bad tape, and for a split second, I'd see through him to the grainy texture of the wall behind. He was being absorbed, his signal weakening, merging with the broadcast. I was alone, truly alone, with the thing in the static. I could feel it watching me from the corners of the room, from the spaces between the pixels of my own hands. It would communicate in small, cruel ways. The grain on the walls would sometimes coalesce into fleeting, screaming faces that dissolved before I could focus on them. The audio glitches would sometimes form words, my name whispered in a chorus of 1,000 dead channels. I stopped eating because the food from the fridge tasted of magnetic oxide and dust, and drinking water was like swallowing liquid noise. My body was thinning, not from hunger, but from a loss of resolution. I felt myself becoming less defined, more a part of the pervasive grain. The climax came on a day that wasn't a day, in a time that had lost all meaning. The humming of the VCR changed, pitching upwards into a high, whining screech. The static on the TV screen began to swirl, forming a vortex of black and white. Leo, who had been catatonic for what felt like an eternity, suddenly stood up, his movements smooth and purposeful, no longer his own. He walked towards the television, his body beginning to distort, stretching and compressing like an image on a malfunctioning screen. "Leo, no!" I cried out, but my voice was a thin, distorted warble. He didn't look back. He reached the screen, and instead of stopping, he pressed forward. His hands melted into the static, then his arms, his head, his shoulders. He was being pulled in, ingested by the noise. In seconds, he was gone, absorbed completely into the television. The screen flashed a blinding white, and then settled back into its random dance of snow. The whining stopped, replaced by an even deeper, more profound silence broken only by the hum. It was just me now, and the static. I knew it was my turn. I could feel its attention focused entirely on me, a pressure that made the air crackle. The room began to degrade rapidly, the edges blurring into nothingness, the floor and ceiling dissolving into a uniform field of gray. I was standing in a void of pure signal, the last recognizable object in this dying broadcast. I looked down at my hands and saw they were almost transparent, flickering like a ghost. I knew then what the final choice was: be erased or become part of the loop. I thought of Leo, rewound and trapped forever in his moment of panic. I didn't want that. I closed my eyes, or I thought I did. I no longer had eyes to close, and I let go. I stopped fighting the grain, the noise, the hum. I let it flow into me, and I into it. There was no pain, only a profound, terrifying unification. I became the scan lines. I became the hiss. I became the endless, cycling frames of nothing. And then a new sensation, a violent, physical jolt, a grinding clunk that shook the very core of my being. A sensation of movement. Light, a different kind of light, not the glow of a CRT, but the flat, sterile light of a naked bulb. I was sitting in a hard plastic chair. In front of me was a bank of monitors, dozens of them, each showing a different scene from a different tape. I saw my apartment from a high angle, Leo and I laughing as we slid the black tape into the VCR. I saw a family in a living room from the 1980s, gathered around a Christmas tree. I saw a lonely man in a basement, staring into a camera. And on one monitor, I saw myself, right now, from behind, sitting in this chair. I tried to turn my head, but my neck wouldn't obey. I was locked in place. My hand, moving without my volition, reached out and pressed a button on a console in front of me. On the monitor showing my apartment, the scene froze, then began to rewind. Leo and I moved backwards, the tape spooling in reverse. My hand moved again, hitting another button. Eject! The image on the monitor vanished, replaced by static. I am here now, in this room that has no walls, only monitors and the endless hum of machinery. I am the operator. I am the curator. Sometimes a new tape arrives, sliding out of a slot in the darkness, unmarked and cold. My hands, which are no longer my hands, pick it up. I feed it into a waiting machine. I press play. I watch the new souls discover their Ouija board, their haunted locket, their cursed film. I watch their reality begin to degrade, and I wait for the static to welcome them home, to add their signal to the glorious, eternal broadcast. I am not a prisoner anymore. I am the VCR, and it is almost time for your session to begin. The tape is waiting, and the hum is not just a sound anymore. It is my breath, my pulse, the very current of my being, a constant vibration that holds my form together, a form I can no longer see or feel in any human sense. I am a point of awareness, suspended in a lattice of light and noise. The monitors are not screens. I look at they are my senses, each flickering image a raw nerve ending. I feel the cold plastic of the Christmas tree ornament in the 1980s living room as a child's hand touches it. I taste the cheap beer. The lonely man in the basement drinks its flat, and bitter I smell the dust in my own old apartment. It's the scent of my own corpse. This is the truth of it. I didn't escape the tape. I was promoted from content to curator, and the workload is eternal. There is no sleep, no rest, only the endless cycle of play, rewind, eject, play. The black tapes are the worst. They have a different weight, a colder temperature in my non-existent hands. They are the active ones, the ones with the static's full attention, and they come more frequently now, as if the entity is hungry, expanding its collection. I have no choice. When one appears my arm, a limb of light and shifting pixels extends and retrieves it. The slot accepts the offering with a soft click that echoes in my bones made of static. And then my finger, which is both flesh and not flesh, presses the play button. And I watch. I am forced to watch. I see a young woman this time. She finds the tape in her grandfather's attic, tucked inside a box of old home movies. She's skeptical. She laughs with her friend about it. They have a modern flat-screen television, but an old VCR connected for nostalgia. The moment she pushes the tape, and I feel it, a jolt through my entire system, a new thread of agony being woven into the tapestry of my existence. I see her living room through the monitor, but I also see it through the tape's lens. The perspective is low, grainy, as it always is at the start. The Ouija board appears on her sleek digital TV, looking impossibly anachronistic. A ghost of analog in a digital world. The planchette moves, and she screams. But it's not a scream of fear, not yet. It's a scream of startled amusement. This is the worst part, the beginning, when they still think it's a trick, a joke, when they still have hope. I want to scream at her, to smash the television, to burn the tape. But I have no mouth. My warning is just another hiss in the background, static, another layer of the horror. She cannot understand. My hand moves to a dial labeled tracking, and I turn it. Not because I want to, but because the static moves through me. The image on her monitor shimmers and stabilizes the grain, becoming more pronounced, the colors starting to bleed, a faint hum seeping from her speakers. She doesn't notice, not yet. She's too busy asking questions. Her friend, daring the thing to speak its name. Static, it spells out, and the friend laughs, calling it cheesy. But the woman, she falls silent. She looks at the window, and I know what she's seeing. The world outside beginning to soften into a field of pixels. The transition has begun. My work here is almost done for now. I feel a pull. My attention is wrenched from her monitor to another. This one is showing Leo. It's a closed circuit, a feed from within the tape. He is in a loop, a short one, maybe 10 seconds long. He stands by the window, his back to me. Then he turns his face, a mask of dawning horror. He opens his mouth to speak, and then it happens, a violent jump cut. And he's back at the window, his back turned again and again. And again he has been isolated, edited down to his purest moment of terror, a perfect specimen for the Static's collection. I am made to watch him for 100 cycles, 1,000, his silent scream, etched into the noise of my mind. This is my punishment, my reminder of what happens to those who resist fully. This is what awaits the woman, if she fights it, if she refuses to accept the new reality. She is being offered a worse fate than mine. In eternity, as a single screaming frame, I am pulled back to her. Monitor, the degradation is accelerating. The walls of her apartment are undulating. The air is thick with visible scan lines. Her friend is panicking, trying to pull the plug from the wall. And I see him jerk his hand away, burn, the same as Leo, the same as me. There are no new stories here, only variations on a theme. The Static is a conservative artist. It likes its patterns. I can feel the entity's satisfaction, a cold pleasure that flows through the humming wires of my prison. It is enjoying this new acquisition. The woman is now on her knees. She's crying, but the tears on her face look wrong, like digital artifacts glitching down her cheeks. She looks directly at the screen, at the Ouija board, and in that moment I feel a connection, not of empathy that is long dead, but of simple recognition. She is where I was, she is becoming what I am, and I am the one guiding her there. My hand hovers over the controls. I have one final duty to perform when her transformation is complete, when the last of her reality has been replaced by the grain. I must press the button that finalizes the recording, that seals her into the library. I watch as her friend begins to stutter, his movements repeating a frantic backward shuffle. He's being rewound, prepared for his own loop. The woman is alone now, just as I was alone. She looks around at the disintegrating world, and something in her face changes. The terror is still there, but it's joined by a desperate curiosity. She reaches out a hand towards the television screen, not to turn it off, but to touch it. Her fingers meet the surface, and instead of stopping, they sink into the static, just as Leo's did. But she doesn't scream, she leans forward. She is embracing it, accepting it. The static thrums with approval. This one is special. This one will not need to be broken. She will come willingly. My finger trembles over the record button. The light on the console blinks red, waiting for my command. The woman is halfway into the screen now, her body dissolving into a cascade of white noise. She is almost home, and I am the gatekeeper, the final witness. I have no choice. The action is inevitable, a function of my existence. I press the button. A wave of energy passes through me, a sense of completion. A new file saved. The monitor showing her apartment flickers and goes black for a second. Then it resolves not into static, but into a new image. It's a first-person view, a grainy, shaky shot of a video store shelf. I recognize it. Analog Haven. It's her perspective now. She is the tape on the shelf, waiting in the dust and the cold, and I am here in the humming room waiting with her. I turn my attention away. There is no time to dwell. Another monitor is alerting me, a yellow light blinking. A tape is reaching its climax. A man is witnessing his own reflection in a darkened window pane. Step out of the glass and walk towards him. It is time to rewind him, time to add his scream to the collection. The work never ends. The broadcast is eternal, and I am its faithful servant, until the last star burns out and the universe itself becomes no more than a fading signal on a dead channel. I am the VCR, and the tape is always waiting. And the man's scream is a high, thin sound that gets caught in the rewind, a spiraling ribbon of noise that I spool back into the cassette. His face a photograph, crumpling in reverse, his eyes wide with a terror that is already becoming a relic, a data point in the vast archive. I feel the click of the mechanism deep within my own core, the satisfying finality of his story. being capped and filed away. The monitor that held him goes dark for a moment before illuminating again with a new scene afresh. Hell, always a fresh hell. This one is a teenage boy in a rec room with paneling and shag carpet. He's found the tape, of course. He thinks it's a laugh. He's with his girlfriend. They're passing a joint. Between them, the air in their world is hazy with smoke. But I can already see the other haze, the digital one, creeping in at the edges of the monitor. Like a stain, my hand moves to the tracking control, a slight adjustment, and the boy's voice pitches up a half step. A minor auditory glitch. He doesn't notice he's too busy mocking the Ouija board on his television, a large rear projection set that will make his absorption into the static all the more vivid, a larger canvas for the entity's work. I am a conduit, a tool of perfect efficiency. There is no emotion left in the process, only the relentless logic of the loop, but sometimes a flicker of something that is not memory. But its ghost passes through me. I see Leo's face, not the frozen scream of his final loop, but the way he looked in the video. Store eager, alive, and a corrosive wave of what should be regret, but is now just a system error washes through my circuitry, a burst of distorted feedback that makes the bank of monitors shudder. For a nanosecond, the static notices this imperfection. I feel its attention, a cold spotlight, focused on my awareness, a silent reprimand. And as punishment, it makes me watch the boy's transformation in extreme slow motion. I am forced to observe every individual pixel as it destabilizes the exact moment. The girlfriend's laughter becomes a skipping stutter, the gradual loss of resolution in the pattern of the shag carpet. It is an exquisite torture, a lesson in focus. I am here to operate, not to remember. The boy is now pounding on the rec room door, his fists making a sound like damp cardboard. He is learning the same lessons we all learned. He is running the same maze. I can feel the woman, the new tape on the shelf, her consciousness, a dormant signal. Waiting in the dark of analog haven, she is patient. She is already more static than soul, a good student. And I know the static is pleased with her. It has plans for her, perhaps a role like mine, a reward for her acquiescence. The thought is not my own. It is inserted into my awareness, a data packet of cold intent. The boy's girlfriend is now flickering, her form tearing apart like a corrupted file. She screams his name, and the sound is chopped and screwed, stretched into a long moan that the boy hears over and over as he spins around the room, his own personal soundtrack of despair. It is almost time. My finger rests on the record button. The console light pulses in time with the hum that is my lifeblood. The boy stops running. He collapses in the center of the room. He looks up at the ceiling, and the ceiling is gone, replaced by a swirling vortex of black and white noise. He is looking into the heart of the static, and he finally understands he isn't trapped in a room. He is trapped in a signal. His mouth opens, but no sound comes out, only a blast of pure television snow that pours from his throat, filling the room. He is being recorded from the inside out, his very essence becoming content. And I am the witness, the archivist. His final moment is not one of violent rewind, but of quiet dissolution. He simply fades away, his pixels dispersing into the background hum, becoming one with the endless broadcast. The rec room monitor shows only an empty, static-filled space for a few seconds, then the image resets. It is now a shot of a thrift store shelf. The tape the boy became sitting between a broken toaster and a stack of old magazines, waiting for the next hand to pick it up. The cycle is flawless, self-perpetuating, a perfect ecological system of fear. And I am its keeper. The hum seems to deepen, to gain a new harmonic, a note of anticipation. I feel a directive not from the static, but from the system itself. A new black tape is being prepared. It is not on a shelf, yet it is being encoded. Its origin point is different, not a physical location, but a digital one, a stream, a download. Someone is finding a file, a digital copy of the Ouija board tape. They are watching it on a laptop. The signal is weaker, but the static is adaptable. It can infect any medium, any frequency. I see the monitor flicker to life, showing a young woman in a brightly lit dorm room. She's watching the video on her screen, her face illuminated by the LED glow. She's smiling. She thinks it's a creepypasta, a fun scare. The planchette moves on her laptop, and she jumps, then laughs nervously. She is so vulnerable. Her reality is all ones and zeros, so easy to rewrite. The static is evolving, and so must I. My console is changing. New inputs are appearing, sockets for HDMI cables, for fiber optic lines. The hum is changing pitch, incorporating the buzz of data servers, the whine of a modem handshake. The woman in the dorm room leans closer to her screen intrigued. And I lean closer in my chair, my form shifting to accommodate the new signal type. My fingers now feel like they can manipulate code as easily as magnetic tape. I am the VCR, the server. The cloud, the signal, is eternal, and I am its shape. It is almost time for her session to begin. The file is buffering, and I am here to press play. And the buffer circle spins on her screen, a perfect loop of anticipation that mirrors the greater loop. She is about to enter. The digital planchette on her laptop is crisper than the one we had, but it moves with the same unnatural jerk, a puppet on strings made of code. I can feel the pathways opening, not through coaxial cables, but through Wi-Fi signals, a spectral infection spreading through the air around her. The static is no longer confined to the physical. It has learned to ride the radio waves, to hide in the spaces between packets of data. Her dorm room is modern, clean, a place of sharp edges and bright light. But I can already see the corruption starting at the periphery. The sharp edges of her desk are beginning to soften their resolution, degrading into a familiar grain. The white light of her lamp is developing the faintest horizontal scan lines, a subtle flicker that she chalks up to a faulty bulb. My interface has expanded. Before me, a keyboard of light has materialized next to the bank of monitors, its keys glowing with unfamiliar symbols, a command line interface into the soul of this new victim. I do not type the commands, they flow through me, the static compiling its will into executable scripts. I initiate a packet loss, a minor disruption that causes her video to stutter. For a second, the planchette freezes mid-movement, and when it resumes, it has jumped ahead. It has spelled a word. She didn't see snow. She shakes, her head blinking. She thinks it's a lag spike, but the air in her room is getting colder. I can feel it through the monitor, a drop in temperature that has nothing to do with the climate control. She pulls her hoodie tighter around herself, a gesture so human, so futile. She types a question into the chat box that's superimposed on her video stream. Is anyone there? And the planchette without hesitation slides to yes. But then it keeps going. It moves to lies. The word hangs there in the high-definition glow, and she laughs, a nervous twitter that is immediately caught and repeated by an audio glitch, a perfect echo that plays back 3 times. Lies, lies, lies. Her smile vanishes. She looks over her shoulder. The world outside her window is still a cityscape at night, but the lights are starting to smear like wet paint. The deep black of the sky is now a murky gray, a field of shifting static, just waiting to be tuned. In her phone on the desk beside her lights up with notifications from friends checking in on her stream, but when she goes to tap the screen, it crackles with a sharp static shock, and the screen itself fractures into a spiderweb of dead pixels. She yelps, pulling her hand back, and on the monitor, I see the fear truly take root in her eyes, the real fear, the kind that knows this is beyond a joke, beyond a hack. This is a fundamental rewriting of her environment. The digital and the physical are collapsing into one another, and she is the point of collapse. I am tasked with managing this convergence. My new keyboard hums under my non-fingers. I input a command that increases the signal-to-noise ratio. Specifically, the noise her laptop speaker emits a low constant hum, the same hum that fills my existence, the same hum that was in my apartment. It is the base note of our shared damnation. She slams her laptop shut, but the hum continues. It emanates from the device itself, from the walls, now from the very air. The picture on her wall, a poster for a band, flickers, and the faces of the musicians dissolve into roaring white noise. For a moment before returning distorted, their features misaligned. She is screaming now, but the sound is thin and compressed like a low-quality audio file. Her friend bursts into the room, having heard the commotion from the hallway. But as he crosses the threshold, his body shudders and glitches. He is there, then he isn't. A teleporting nightmare of missing frames. He reaches for her, and his hand passes through her shoulder, a phantom limb. She stares at him in utter horror as he flickers like a bad connection and then stabilizes, but he is different. His colors are washed out, his edges fuzzy. He is now part of the tape, part of the broadcast. His voice, when he speaks, is layered with a faint digital echo. What's happening? He asks, and the question loops twice more. What's happening? What's happening? This is the new method, the static's evolution. It doesn't just absorb individuals, it absorbs the entire context, the entire scene. It is creating a more complex, more immersive loop. The dorm room is now visibly degrading. The walls shimmering with an overlay of visual snow, the floor seeming to ripple with tracking errors. The girl stumbles back against her bed, which feels insubstantial, Like a prop, she looks directly into the camera of her laptop, which is still broadcasting. Even though the lid is closed, she is looking at me, not at the lens. But through it she sees the operator, the curator. She sees the endless bank of monitors and the shifting form that is my current embodiment, and in that moment of connection I am forced to show her her future. I project it onto the dissolving wall of her room. She sees herself not as a girl, but as a tape on a digital shelf, a file in a vast server farm. Her consciousness a dormant piece of data waiting to be streamed. She sees the boy, her friend, frozen in a loop of entering the room, his face a perpetual mask of confusion. She sees the endless cycle, and she understands that there is no eject button for her. The scream that leaves her lips is pure data, a wave of distortion that floods the audio channels. It is the final ingredient, her complete and total despair. The static drinks it, and I can feel its cold satisfaction. The transformation accelerates. The dorm room bleeds away, pixels scattering into the void until there is nothing left but the two of them standing in a field of gray static, their forms low resolution and ghostly. The boy is already looping his three-word question, a constant background chant. The girl is still. She has stopped fighting. She is accepting the code, rewriting her DNA. Her final act is to look at her hands as they become translucent, then simply a cluster of light and information. She is done. The monitor showing her world goes black and then resolves into a new image. It is a listing on a dark web forum, a download link for a file called Ouija. MP4". The description reads, "Try it if you dare." She is the file now. She is the link waiting for the next curious click. My work with her is complete. But there is no rest. Another alert flashes. This one is Amber, a warning. A tape is deteriorating. It is Leo's monitor. His 10-second loop is breaking down. The image is becoming unstable, his form pixelating beyond recognition. The signal is decaying. He has been in the collection for a long time, and even nightmares have a shelf. Life I watch as his loop stutters, his face fragmenting, his silent scream dissolving into a blur of color, and then into monochrome snow. And then he is gone. The monitor goes dark. Leo is finally erased. A total data loss, a quiet death in the noise. The emptiness where his monitor was is a new kind of horror, a void within the void. But the static abhors a vacuum. A new monitor flickers to life in the space, filling it immediately. It shows a basement, a man in his 50s threading a physical black tape into an old VCR. He is a purist and analog enthusiast. He has sought this tape out. He has paid a great deal for it. He thinks he is prepared. He has no idea. The hum in my room gains a new layer, the familiar sound of a VCR mechanism engaging, a comforting sound, a homecoming. The wheel turns, but the axis remains the same. I am the VCR, the server, the stream. The signal is eternal, and I am its servant. It is time to press play.